So again, most of you were in a class with me yesterday. I realize not everybody. I get that. But as I said, I'm not printing out syllabi just because of the fact that when I did last year, 50% of them were left on the table. And to me, that's just a waste of paper. You know, you've got 500 pages, what is it, a year that you can print or something like that. But if that bugs you and you really want me to print you out a syllabus, just let me know. I'll do it. I don't care. But I only want it if you're going to take it with you. I mean, to leave it here is just kind of silly. So my information has not changed. Again, I know this bugs some people, you know, because I've already heard this. Well, your office hours Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Yeah, but like today, I've got 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 1 to 3, and 3 to 5. And on Monday and Wednesday, it's 8 to 10, 1 to 3, and 3 to 5. Now, Mondays and Wednesdays from 10 to 12, I don't have a class, so usually I'll be in here. But I'm not going to put those down as official office hours. All right, but normally I'll be in here. All right, you know John, you know Mike, hopefully. They're going to be here again this semester. John's in the class. Mike is here as a lab assistant. All right, and I think you've done some work with Joomla, correct? Maybe not much, but yeah, okay. Well, I haven't done much either, so it'll work out well. Again, there's the course. There's the information on the course. This stuff is literally taken, pretty much at least, right out of the catalog. The goal, as it says, is to give you an intermediate understanding of Joomla. We meet in here. We meet 8 to 9:50. As always, there's a link to the book. Now, I'm just going to take for granted that maybe yours is still downloading, which is fine. But if I bring this up, or attempt to, if you look in here, if you look up on the screen here, okay, the book has 12 chapters in it. Chapter 1 is your typical kind of blow-off chapter that you find, and you ought to use Joomla because it does this for you, etc., etc. These are all the pros of using Joomla. They don't really give any cons type of thing. And then they show you some sites, some websites that have been created using Joomla. We'll do that. We'll spend a little bit going over that. Chapter 2, installation, getting Joomla up and running. I want to get to that point today. All right, again, I want everybody to check and make sure you can get into your virtual desktops. Joomla is not on the machines. We're putting it in ourselves. I'll explain why we're doing that when we get to that point. All right, there's a reason for that, and that is that when you set it up, you're going to make yourself an administrator. So you're going to give a password, or a username and a password. And for you to get into the administrative side of Joomla, you better remember that username and password. If you want to use your same one as here, that's fine. That's up to you. I'm not telling you to do that or not to do that. All right, but we'll get to that in just a bit. Chapter 3, first steps. They have you walk around. When we create this, we're going to load some sample data. And as we load the sample data in Chapter 3, you kind of look around and take a look at what that sample data is. All right. Chapter 4, it's kind of a funny chapter in that web building basics, creating a site in an hour. And the first thing they say in the chapter is, well, not really an hour. But the idea is if you have experience creating websites, you know, it's what you're doing during that hour is you're learning Joomla. It's not so much that you're learning website design. That's kind of what they're talking about here. All right. Then in chapter 5, notice what it says, small sites, big sites, organizing your content effectively. This is a very different way of looking at website design as opposed to the stuff we've talked about before. I mentioned this yesterday, but again, I realize not all of you were in the class. Technically, in Joomla, all right, there are not any web pages. Everything is put in there as a big MySQL database. All right, so you don't know that. Your users don't know that because to them it looks just like a website. All right, and the whole thing, what works out well in this is it's PHP powered. All right, so those of you who are in the class this afternoon, you're going to be starting to learn more about PHP. All right, and if you have any questions on PHP, you can just you can ask either John or you can ask Mark because they're both experts. All right, yes, or Mike, or Mike. No, I was. They know. They knew I was just kidding. That's why. The question is Joomla similar to Dreamweaver? Dreamweaver is more. It's kind of a supercharged editor. All right. And Joomla is a content management system. So in other words, it allows you to create web pages, create menus, do all sorts of stuff, play with images, etc., do all sorts of different things. But to the user, it looks just like any other website. But to you, technically, the way that it's done is we're going to create a MySQL database today, and that's where everything is going to be housed. So I hope I answered your question. All right. Chapter 6, you start to get into, as it says, adding and editing articles. Chapter 7, creating attractive home pages and overview pages. Chapter 8, playing with menus. Chapter 9, allowing users to log in and contribute. What you find out in Chapter 9 is when you first set Joomla up, you're an administrator. And technically you're referred to as super user. All right, kind of a term that's more or less borrowed from Linux land or Starnix land, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, when you do this, when you set up a Joomla website, you start noticing when you're looking, I'm not going to read any of this because we'll get to it in due time, but you can give different people who use your site different permissions. And up to, you can grab and make other people administrators just like you are if you want to do that. And if you do that, they have the same powers and abilities that you have. In other words, they can add things, they can update things, they can remove things. Okay? So we'll get into that, like I said, as we get into this a little bit more. Chapter 10, getting the most out of your site, extending Joomla. One thing about this package, just so you know, one of the things they'll get to in this chapter especially is they'll talk about extensions. What are extensions? They're basically add-ons that you can add on to Joomla. And there are thousands of them. I think that there was somewhere, I read an article, it's been a while, but upwards of at least 30,000 free extensions. Things like being able to add calendars, if you want to do that. You know, all sorts of niceties. Not only that, there are people who are making their living by creating and selling extensions that aren't free. All right? So there's different things that you can use, you know, that you can buy. Some of them are very cheap. We're talking, anywhere from $5 to $10. All right. Other ones, upwards of, $50 or a few $100s. I wouldn't expect you to buy anything for this class, but we'll look at some of the stuff, and they have you work on a little bit of it in here. Chapter 11, as it says, working with templates, and then it ends up in Chapter 12, attracting search engine traffic. If you've never heard the term SEO before, then shame on your instructor, but that's search engine optimization. And what you're trying to do, just putting it in a nutshell, is when somebody Googles something related to your site, ideally you want your site to appear on the first page. So how do you do that? Well, a lot of ways. You've got good meta tags in there. Some people will still tell you if money does it too, type of thing. But let's face it, if for instance, if I went in there and typed in Joomla tutorials, I'd probably get at least 1 million hits. Well, they're not all going to be on the first page. And you'll find out if you start looking that some of the ones on the first page aren't that good. Some of the ones on later pages are good. So how do they move up? Well, supposedly Google's got this magical formula that they don't tell anybody about. All right, as far as how you move up. A lot of it is how many people view your page, but there's a lot of intangibles and a lot of other stuff that's involved in it. All right, so that's it. Appendix A, which we actually might look at today, it's pretty good. It's very down to earth, and what I mean is it's very general and generic in nature. It talks about keeping a site secure. And Appendix B, I'm not going to go through because it's, as it says, is if you want to create a multilingual site, but we're not going to be doing that. I mean, it's enough to just teach this to you. But if you have an interest in that, you can take a look at it. At the end of just about every chapter, they've got 3 or 4 questions that they ask you. They call it a pop quiz. You can take the quiz if you want. I don't care. Or you don't have to. But as it says, at the end, they give you the answers. So the book is around 400 pages. In an ideal world, and I've said this to you before, I know we don't live in an ideal world, okay? But in an ideal world, we'll finish this book in about 9 weeks. Well, that's like half the semester. Yeah. And then the other half of the semester, I want you to build your own site completely in Joomla. and you're going to do everything. This is the first time. You're going to write requirements. You're going to basically mock it up for me and tell me what each page is going to look like. I'm going to have a list of the different things that I want you to include in it. All right, and that's how you're going to be graded. Now, that said, my hope is that you'll still be coming to class. And I'm not looking at anybody, whether you think so or not. I'm not picking on anybody, but I know with some of you that means, oh, good, I can be home then. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. All right, but that's a decision that you have to make. I will tell you that if we're able to stick to a schedule similar to that, all right, that it'll be due somewhere around 2 weeks before the end of the semester. Now, you say, well, wait a minute, what about the last 2 weeks and what do we do? Well, then I'm going to have to grade them and look at them, so make suggested changes, etc., give them back to you so you still have a week or so that you can try to fix those. Does that make sense? All right. And my hope is that everybody who's in this class, next semester, you're going to be taking the Design and Implementation Projects class. And you may or may not know this, but in that class, it is required at the end of the semester, you have to get up and give a presentation. And it can be anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes long. So, well, I can't talk. Yeah, the first time I ever got up to talk, my voice cracked. It was so bad that the teacher sent me out of the room, literally. She said, I'm going to let you try again after the next person because I took public speaking. I came back in. I had no idea what to do or what to say. And I'm not trying to be funny here, so if I say this and you laugh, it's not meant to be funny. I almost pissed my pants. That's how nervous I was. I was a freshman at UW Milwaukee. And I came out, and she said, are you ready? And I said, I hope so. So I got up there, and I'm like, oh, I better say something. And I said, for those of you who wondered, puberty's much better the second time around. And a lot of people laughed, which I didn't think it was even that funny, but a lot of people laughed. I felt better. I got up. Was it good? It sucked. But I did it. And by the time I got to the end of the class, I wasn't the best speaker in the class, far from it, but I was okay. And she even took me, it was Mrs. Plaus or something like that. She came up and told me afterwards, she said, you've improved a lot. Now, if she would know that over time I'd become an instructor, she probably would have bet the farm that that would never have happened. All right? You're not graded on whether you get up there and how many times you clear your throat or say, excuse me, But you have to do that because I bring in people from the outside. I bring in about a half dozen to a dozen people from our advisory committee, and you're performing for them. In some ways, you're auditioning for a job. So it's a chance for you. And one of the things that you may want to show in there is you may want to show what the site that you're working on. In the Design and Implementation Project class, you work on a project too. All right, it might be an extension of this that you start here. It might be something totally different. But it's a chance for you to show your wares and the type of stuff that you've been working on. All right, and it was all over the board last year when we did it. One guy in the class literally went out and created his own Android game. He found like a template for games and he created his own game. It was pretty cool what he did. All right. Tony Reynolds, and a lot of you know Tony. Tony went and created, it was basically shopattony.com. And he put a ton of stuff, he literally, it was all done in PHP. And it was all over, like I said, all over the board as far as what people did. All right. So we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. All right, a couple things. Again, I don't want to read this to you, but notice it's aimed at anyone who wants to build and maintain a great website. It does not assume any Joomla experience. And as I said to you, my Joomla experience is minimal. Okay. They will talk about stuff in here, for instance, as they mention here, towards the end of the book, they actually talk about CSS. But the author, in trying to be complete, doesn't assume that you've got a lot of CSS knowledge. So the first thing he does is he says, basically, this is a selector, etc. And it's very basic. I'm not going to spend any time on that. We've already done that in other classes. We're going to just skip that part there about piracy, too. So, all right, I'm just going to jump right into Chapter 1. All right. Questions on the syllabus, anything that's in there, there won't be 7 assignments. I put that down for every one of my classes. What we're told basically is to err on the side of caution. So even if you think you're going to have 2 assignments, put 7 down anyway. That way if you have 2, no one's going to say, well, you said we were going to have 7. I want 5 more. But if you say you're going to have 2 and you give 7, then you'll have somebody say, well, look at your syllabus. That isn't fair. And that's happened before. All right. Again, the material is there on the P drive. So if you, as it always is, so if you have not had a class with me before and you do go out to the P drive, that's what's out there. The homework will be here and it'll be online. The in-class material will be here and it'll be online. The PDFs will be here and some will be online. And the syllabus is here along with the course evaluation. Just the same way the classes are always set up. All right? Yes? Yeah, I haven't done that, but yes, according to them it is. Yes. In fact, that's supposed to be a fairly simplistic operation. All right. The other thing too is the way that they've set Joomla up. Just so you know, is when they set up a version, they basically say that that version will be the version for 1 to 2 years, and during that time they're working on another version. All right. But during that time, they may put out releases. The version right now is version 3. All right. But if we go out right now, or you can do this if you want, because we're going to do this eventually. If you go out right now, I think it's joomla.org, but I'm not positive. I know that says .net, but that's something else. And we, right there, if you go to download, again, we'll do this later, but notice that's the same version 3.3 when I went through this stuff that was at the beginning of May. So it's version 3, release 3. But version 4 isn't supposed to come out yet for a while. I heard 2015 sometime, but I'm not sure. I think that's even in the book here. All right. It's funny, too, because one of the things that I do a lot of times when I go with my wife to malls and stuff, if they have a bookstore, is I go to the bookstore. And typically, now with Borders gone, go to Barnes & Noble and some other ones. But if you've gone to any of those, you may or may not have noticed the selection that they have of IT-related books keeps shrinking. Even the best one that I found, which is Westtown at Madison, is a lot smaller than it used to be. It's about half the size that it used to be. And the only reason I'm telling you that is, by and large, if you go there, even at a big one, they'll have no more than 2 or 3 Joomla books. All right, and I've not seen this book that you have at a bookstore. All right. As we go through, as always, if you have questions, that's fine. Let me know. I don't want to read to you. All right. Again, I walk by. I'm not even going to say who, but I walked by an instructor's room, and I was listening, and the instructor had the book up in their hands, and they were just reading to the students. And I thought to myself, if I was in that class, I would be a little peeved. I think I know how to read, but whatever. All right. So, just so you know, and you're going to see this in this chapter, but what they create in here is they create a website that's called Corba. Corba? Yeah, it's an acronym, and it's going to sound hokey, and it's only because it's hokey. Corba is an acronym that stands for Collectors of Really Bad Art. So it's people who like really bad paintings and the like, and they, it's mythical. Okay? So they have you create the site. All right? And basically what they want you to do, they explain it to you step by step in here. All right? And we'll take a look at it in just a bit. We'll get there. All right. Again, I mentioned this to you before. It says when it comes to creating great professional websites that are easy to use, you can't beat a CMS. So what is that? They're going to get into that in this chapter. All right? But the way that the way there are different CMSs, different content management systems out there, and they're done differently. They're implemented differently. All right? And what they say there for joining the CMS revolution, what they say is, you know how to set up websites, you create web pages, etc. You create web pages, you create CSS, you create JavaScript, etc. Then they come through here and they say, enter the holy grail of web building. And then they go through about what it is, but they're saying, technically, there are no web pages, which is, as they say, it's a paradigm shift. It's a shift in the way of thinking. All right. So this is how the author right here. Let's just look at this whole paragraph again. I don't want to read it to you. but they explain what a CMS is. Notice there's still a web server involved. All right, I'm still trying to work with IT on this monster that we have over here with some of the problems and stuff that I'm having with it. Ideally, when we get all done, when you're done with this, we'd be able to move or copy the stuff that we're working on to that machine, and you could get to it from offsite. That's what I'm working toward. What'd be really nice about that is, let's say that, you know, Kelly creates his project and he shows it next semester in the design and implementation projects class, and somebody looks at it and says, yeah, I'd really like to see that. Then he can put the URL up there and they can hit it from off-site. I will tell you that the only way that they're letting me do this is somewhere in there it's going to say Blackhawk Technical College, and it'll say something like test site. And the reason they're doing that is once they give you the ability to use it, they don't want you to put stuff out there where you're trying to make money. They're not, nobody's being accusory and saying you do that, but they don't even want to make that a possibility for people. All right. So like I said, that's still a work in progress. All right. So notice, a CMS is really an advanced set of scripts that uses a database to store the content of your website. From that database, it retrieves whatever it needs to do, whatever it needs to do. All right. Ideally, it makes changes. It makes it easy for you to change things. Okay. You can change them from anywhere. And again, you could sit there and you could bring up your site. If you've got the domain, etc., you can bring it up on your phone, make a change if you're the administrator, and boom, it takes effect immediately. All right, that kind of thing. What you're going to see when we get into this is there's two very distinct views of Joomla. There's the front end, and that's what the end user sees. And there's the back end. That's the administrative side. As of right now, when we create this, the only person who's going to be able to see that back end is you. That's where the magic, etc., happens. And as soon as you go and you use the administrative side to change something, you can immediately just save it and immediately go over to the front end and see the changes. Okay? And I will tell you that I think it's chapter 3 in here. They will tell you this too. And what I'm about to tell you, this may or may not bother you, but the way that this is set up, I want you to know this, because it kind of drove me nuts until I got to chapter 3 in the book. The administrative side, the way that it's set up by default, in chapter 3 they tell you how to change this. I think it's 3. But by default, if you don't use the administrative side for 15 minutes, it logs you out. So you've got to log back in again. It's not a big thing. It's just a little screen that says username and login. But to some people it drives them nuts, you know, that you're constantly doing that. So like I said, it's either in 2 or 3, but I think it's chapter 3. They show you how to bump that up. And they bump it up in here to 45 minutes. I don't care if you bump it up to 10 hours. The only thing to remember is if somebody ever gets into your site, you know, if they get into the administrative side, that they can do a lot of damage to your site. All right, again, we'll look at that as we go on in here. All right, as it says, CMSs by and large are open source. I'm hoping that everybody in here understands open source. They talk about it here. Again, the idea behind open source is it's available to everybody. You're encouraged to download it. And a lot of times what they'll have are even copies of the latest and greatest that you can go and download, and even if it's not a release yet. So they might have 3.3.37 that's out there. And if you know where to go, you could get that. All right. We're going to use the most stable version, which is 3.3. All right. So why should you use it? Again, people tend to use it because it's easy to use. Now, a couple of you in here, in this room right now, have already gone through and either started working or maybe even completed work on internships. And one of the things you probably know is when you work and when you're doing a job for somebody, all right, you're creating a site for them or whatever, a lot of times what you hear from them is, okay, I hope this is going to be easy to use because I'm really kind of computer ignorant. This kind of thing is almost ideal for someone like that. It really and truly is. All right, because it's fairly simplistic, it's fairly intuitive. You may not agree with that when we start using it, but the stuff that's in there in many ways makes a lot of sense. All right, but it's like anything else, and it's a different way of looking at things. All right, so it may not seem like it's real intuitive when we start. Also, what has typically happened, I've been doing a little bit of reading on the history of this, is when they put out a new release, it can look quite a bit different from the previous release. They're trying to incorporate suggested changes by people who have been using the product. So the only reason I'm telling you that is if you look at 2.5 and then you look at 3, they may look totally different. Not only that, quite often, to be able to just sit there and convert from 2.5 to 3, it's a little bit more work than you'd think. Because what you have available, and one of the things I mentioned a lot earlier, is there are predefined Joomla templates you can use. And Joomla makes no guarantee that the template that you use for 2.5 will be supported in 3, for example. All right, there probably will be something similar to it, but it may or may not be supported. So you might have to do some work if you're going, if you or your users are going to go from Joomla 2.5, for example, to Joomla 3. All right, yeah. I would see no reason you couldn't, but if you're going to use something like GoDaddy, you would have to have, I would think, the ability, I could be wrong about this, but I would think you'd have to have the ability to at least create a database on there. All right, as far as I know. All right, now this is sort of a misnomer here. I'm up on the next page here. Adding new features takes just a few clicks. That is true. You go into the administrative side or the admin side, you make your changes, and boom. But sometimes you save them, you go over to the front end, and it doesn't show right away because there's more that you have to do than just make those changes. All right, you've got to basically send the equivalent of an alert to the system to know that. All right, and again, we'll get into that stuff as we go on. Again, it's very easy to change the site's appearance. Now, just so you know, all right, for instance, if I go out there right now and I'm going to type in this, free Joomla templates. There are more than 40 or 4,000 rather. Okay, Joomla templates, fine. There's something I'm actually looking for in here, so let's see. Of course, I'm not finding it, so let's do it this way. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. But again, there's 4,000 of them right there, and they're free. And they have a lot of other ones that are out there. I went through this. They give you an exercise towards the end where they have you download a new template. And I will tell you, this is one place where I thought the book didn't do a great job. I got it to work, but I had to do a lot of stuff that wasn't in the book. All right? So we'll go through that, and we'll take our time going through it. It's not that I have this mad desire to see how fast we can rush through this book. Not at all. But I think the faster we get through it, all right, and do this project, and the faster that you start on your own project, the more you're going to enjoy it. All right? So you should be thinking right now, too, about what you'd like to do a site on. Again, as it says, the current version adds many improvements and new features. Okay, we're going to go through some of those already today. All right. It says, comes with all the advantages of a state-of-the-art CMS, to name just a few. Again, easy to edit and add content. Keeping hyperlinks up to date is greatly automated. You don't have to maintain the website all by yourself. That is, if you give other people the ability. Not only that, when you give other people the ability to do things, there's different levels that you can give them, just so you know that. You don't have to make somebody an administrator. All right, you can give them basically just below an administrator where they can go and they can add content, etc. But that content, before it officially gets added, you have to be the one that okays it. Then it gets added. See what I'm saying? And the reason that that's important is if you're going to create a site for somebody and it's going to be in Joomla, there might be only one person that's the administrator, that everything has to funnel through her, for example. Right? And you can do that, and we'll get into that again in a later example. Notice it's the engine behind some 20 million websites worldwide, and this number is growing rapidly every day. All right, that's from a book that came out in 2013, so the number should be bigger than that by now. All right, so what kind of sites can you build? This is one of the things that I wanted to show you here. All right, so notice community.joomla.org. This is Showcase. I'm not going to do this. But if you do go out there and you start clicking some of these are all sites that you can go in and start taking a look at that people have created using Joomla. So if I just grab, I'm just going to grab the first one, Alliance for Catholic Education, University of Notre Dame. All right, website URL. So I don't know about you, but when I look at this, I don't sit there and say, and I'm not saying is it good or bad. That really is irrelevant. But the point is, when I look at this, so if I go here and I go to programs and services, for example, to me, this looks like any other website. Maybe it looks a little text intensive, but you get the idea. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll get into that. Again, a lot of it depends on permissions and everything, and how well you've got your the site locked down. That's why I said we'll probably go over the security part by the end of the period today. So bottom line is, depends on who you ask. Any site is going to be as secure as the people who are manning it. I'm saying this, I'm being taped, so I probably shouldn't, but I think a huge mistake this school made was getting rid of that security program after Doug left. Because there's always going to be a need for people like that. And again, the biggest problem is, and I've said this before, and you've all maybe you've heard me say this, it's the same kind of thing as when you change your locks after somebody breaks in. So when do people hire a security person? After they've been breached. All right. Again, I was saying this to the first year class yesterday, and maybe I said it to you guys too. I don't know if you heard that yesterday. 2.5 million health sites, or not health sites, the records. Now 4.5. Okay, 4.5 million records, health records of people were breached yesterday. And what was the number that was in Russia last month? So it's still happening. All right. So there's always going to be that need. So what I'm telling you is, you can have the best security, but it's the old saying of, you build a better mousetrap and the mice get smarter. There are people that literally, if they want to break into a site bad enough, they'll spend years. They really will. And they look at it, even if it's a one-time thing, that it's worth their time to do that. So that's the showcase, and they go through and they look at some of these. All right, that's the one I guess I could have went to, the ACNDU. And again, that one is that not very pretty, etc. But let's just take a look at a couple of these. All right, so for some reason it's not letting me click or do anything on this, so. And I just wanted to show you that not all of them are just that text intensive as the other one was. Maybe this one will be too. Notice they even got a little slideshow, etc. in here. All right. And you'll find a lot of this. You're going to learn how to do this very quickly. This isn't hard at all. All right. Literally, it's basically a mouse click to put a read more in here. And you look at this, well, I don't like the way that's set up. Well, notice the way it is set up. It's basically set up 2 columns. So you can set it up in as many columns as you want with as many rows. And if you say, well, look at how long that is, that's way too big. It doesn't have to be that big. You can make it as big as you want it to be. I'm looking down on that. The only thing that they have missing is if they had 157 hyperlinks down there, it would look a little like Blackhawk's website. All right. But there's all sorts of them that are out here. That's fine. And again, this was a good one. I'm not going to go here, but just you get the idea. This is the Guggenheim. Some of these sites literally have hundreds of pages on them. So Kelly, to go back to your point, it's like a regular website. The bigger you make it, the more potential you have for holes in it. And if you're going to be creating a website that's going to have e-commerce on it, there's a possible security hole in there too, depending on how are you going to manage that? Are you going to use PayPal? Are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to use some other third party? So it depends on a lot of different things. All right. But I'd suggest that you go out and take a look at some of these. Like I said, like the Guggenheim, there's a lot of them. All right. Okay, well, I like what the author says here. It may sound too good to be true. Is it really that great? Let's be honest. It makes it reasonably easy, but of course it requires some time and effort. And that's where this comes in. You already know how to create a website, whether you think you do or not. And I don't know if whoever you had for 157, if he or she requires you to create a website, whether it was one page or several pages, but you could do it. All right? But the point is, you're going to be doing it in a different way now. All right? So it will involve somewhat of a learning curve, just like anything else. As it says, once you get Joomla set up, you'll be able to get the hang of creating the basic site. That's my hope, at least. All right? So what you'll be learning in this book. Again, this is one of the reasons I picked this book. As I mentioned, I looked probably at a good half dozen of them. But that's it. That's why. The whole book is a big project. As it says, and it really starts in like chapter 4, more in chapter 5, but you'll see that. So as it says there, You learn by doing. You do it. And I don't have any problem. I want you to do the site. That's going to be part of your grade in here. I don't know how much, but that'll be part of your grade. But I don't care if you want to bring in your own images. I don't care if you want to make it your own colors, etc. In fact, I'd encourage you to do that. Why would I want to go and grade 10 or 11 of these that looked exactly the same? To me, that'd be a waste of my time. Plus, it allows you to infuse a little bit of your own creativity, all right, which is what I think we're looking for in here anyway. All right, so this is some of the stuff that's in here. Again, I don't want to read it, so just take a quick look at it. We're almost to the end here at chapter 1. You'll do most, if not all, of the stuff that you see in here throughout this book. All right. Then he talks about it again. It says it says on the Joomla website 2 versions are available, 2.5 and 3.x. 2.5 will be supported until 2014. Well, that's where we are. All right, it says it's stable. Joomla developers, I guess the next one, as it says, is 3.5. I don't know when that'll come out. I'm sure you can go online and find that stuff out if you have an interest in it. So again, the chapter ends by saying this is the example site that you'll be building. All right. They even go in and they have you create, I guess I can, right there, the logo by yourself. And there are free tools out there that you can use to go and create that. Now, is that a great logo? It's one they created. You know, they put a couple little polygon type of things in there and then the word Corba afterwards. That's their logo. Again, I suggest that once we start doing that, be creative. Create your own logo. All right? But this is what they do. And again, yours may look like this. Yours may not look very much like this. But either way, it's fine. This is some more of it here. As it says, later on we'll go through some of the advanced features. As it says, the site is a good example of what you can accomplish. They start very basic, as you'd imagine, and they add features as you go through the material that's in the chapters. All right. Now that was quick. Okay. Hopefully it turned you on and didn't turn you off to this. So we're going to take a break in just a couple minutes, but if you look, this is what we're going to do next. All right. Now, it's up to you. Again, I can print off copies, but on the P drive, there's that folder that's called In Class. In the In Class, there's another free Joomla book that I found online a couple weeks ago. Joomla 3, the book for everyone. This is one of those books that's in there as a hyperlinked book. In other words, it's a Word file, but as you come back in there, it's just filled with hyperlinks and you can jump all over the place in it. All right. No, it's not coming up. There it is. That's the book right there. And that's all, everything that you see in there, that's all hyperlinked. Okay, this is actually where you'd want to go. That's the online site. You're going to be able to jump around if you want to do that much better in there than you could by, I just threw this into a Word document. All right, but the other document that's in there called Installing Joomla 3, that's from one of those free PDFs that I put out there before. This is about 7 or 8 pages long, and notice what it is. Installing Joomla 3.0 on localhost using XAMPP. So we're going to take a break. It's about 8:50. Is that right? Around 8:50. Let's come back around 9 o'clock, and we're going to go through this. I want everybody to try to get into your virtual desktop, and hopefully we can. And once we do, we're going to start working on this. I'd like to get through at least chapter 2 of the book by the end of the period. And believe it or not, if there's time, maybe chapter 3. What I may end up doing is on Thursday, talking for about 15 to 30 minutes, and then having you go through chapter 3 yourself, because they have you walk through the features using the site with the sample data that we're going to have in here. I think, again, you're going to get more out of that than having me walk through it with you. All right, so let's take a break again around 9 o'clock, please. We're going to walk through all of it as a class.